Thank you for staying with us. The Almajiri Commission is set to conduct a mop-up exercise targeting Almajiri and out-of-school children in selected states in the country. This initiative aligns with the Commission's mission to combat illiteracy and ensure quality education for these children. The exercise is part of the Commission's broader effort to address the challenges faced by Almajiri and out-of-school children in Nigeria. The Commission's Education Quality Assurance Department has outlined objectives that include monitoring and evaluation, promoting quality education, and reintegrating children into formal education. Joining us via Zoom from the United Kingdom is CEO, founder, IA Foundation, Runke Adiagbo. Good morning. Happy New Year. It's good to have you join us.
Good morning, Veronica, and Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks for having me.
Right. Now, I wonder what you make of this decision by the Almajiri Commission to conduct a mop-up exercise targeting Almajiris and out-of-school children. Recall that successive governments over the years in Nigeria have tried this exercise to mop up these people back to school, but not much has been achieved. Even development partners have also contributed towards this exercise, but we haven't seen as much results with regards to their return to schools and also the matter of out-of-school children. But this time around, do you think that this step being taken might be the game changer that we have been looking forward to?
Absolutely. This is a welcome development. And I would want to commend the current government because what we are seeing coming through is the political will. Because, as you know, with this new government, they've set up a new commission called the Commission for Almajiri and Out-of-School Children. And this is a dedicated commission that is responsible for mopping up the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. So this is a welcome development because in previous administration, we did not have a dedicated commission that was responsible for this. So this is really, really good news from where we are sitting. Also, in terms of whether this is sustainable, the fact that we have a dedicated commission to this, and also we have a very competent executive director because we had an out-of-school summit on the 26th of November, and it was one of our guest speakers. And we could see from the way he was addressing the issues that this is a quite competent executive director. And he used to be the commissioner for education in Yobe. So he's a very capable, competent person that can manage that commission. Therefore, we are monitoring closely in terms of what he's doing so far. And it comes across as someone who has the vision, who has the direction in terms of what he wants to do with regards to the strategy to reduce the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. So I have all the confidence that this commission will do what it was set out to do to reduce the number of out-of-school children in a very competent way and in a very sustainable way. So kudos to them and well done to them. And we will be on their case. We would hold their fire to the feet to make sure they do what they are set up to do.
I'm wondering how this is going to be, is this going to materialize, because you're actually expressing your confidence in what they are going to do. But then how sustainable would this be if they are not looking at tackling or addressing the socioeconomic factors that actually led to the Almajiri system in the first place?
Yeah, this issue is multifaceted. And from the little I can see that the government of the day is doing, they are trying to address all these social issues slowly but surely. I mean, as you know, there's the tax reform going through, there is the school feeding program going through. So there are ways in which the government are putting in place to actually address all these social issues. However, as we know, the Almajiri issue in particular is an informal education system. There's nothing wrong with informal education system. However, we need to find a brilliant way of integrating it with formal education. And that is where I think this commission would have to focus on. Yes, these children have the right to get their Islamic education, but how do we integrate it? So there's going to be a lot of things which this commission and the government needs to do. There needs to be lots of reorientation of the parents. It's one thing to let your child, go to a Sangia to get Islamic education. It's one thing for you also to still take responsibility for that child in terms of the welfare of that child and to make sure the child has got access to formal education. So whilst the government is putting mechanism in place to deal with poverty, you know, in terms of giving them school feeding and also trying to give parents who are on low salary or low income money, and also trying to use the tax reforms to address poverty, the parents also need to take responsibility. So there needs to be legislation in place. As you know, in the House of Assembly, the second reading is in place, whereby they're proposing to penalize parents who do not send their children to school. So as far as I'm concerned, this is like a jigsaw puzzle, and all the pieces are being put in place slowly but surely. And at the end of it, there will be a beautiful picture, which will mean essentially we'll be reducing the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria.
All right. I like the fact that you raised two critical issues, the matter of tax reform and also the school feeding program. These have come under some level of criticism over the years, and the most recent one is the tax reform. And that speaks to the mindset of which some persons have with regards to government's effort and measures being put in place to addressing these matters. How do we address the mindset of people towards this matter, knowing that education is a key factor? Some parents might say they, after a while, might want to withdraw their children because they believe that the children is more important to them, addressing other issues as against spending their time in school, maybe sending them to the markets to help them sell and other things. In all, trying to address the social issues that you mentioned, but there are those who still do not understand the importance of education and every effort that government is putting in place.
This is the more reason why we need to make sure we tackle this out-of-school children issue. The reason why is that these parents that are not keen to send their children to school, most of them themselves are not educated. So this poverty cycle is just going round and round, and we need to break that. Because if parents are educated, why wouldn't they want to educate their own children? And because parents are not educated, you know, they don't have good livelihood, and therefore there's poverty in the land. But with education, you can deal with poverty in the land. So it's a big agenda for the government to reorientate its citizens in terms of the importance of education. We see what education is doing to people. We see people like Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala on the international stage representing Nigeria. The only reason why Dr. Ngozi is on that international stage is because of education. We need to show examples like this to parents and to children, that if they want their children to take their family out of poverty and to represent their country internationally, the only weapon they can use to do that is education. And both parents and the government of the day need to take responsibility for that. Because as you know, it is the responsibility of the government to educate its citizens. So we need to do a whole lot of orientation, especially in their local languages. Because these people are mainly illiterate. So if you're talking to them in English, you're going to be talking over their head. We have to have local authorities need to have a unit that will be responsible for reorientating parents in terms of the importance of education. So that's on one side. Legislation also has to be on the other side, because it's one thing for us to reorientate parents, but if some parents are still insistent that their children would not go to school, they rather send them to hawk on the streets, then there needs to be a penalty for that. Because if you don't penalize people, especially in Nigeria, they don't do what they are supposed to do. So both needs to go hand in hand. And also the government of the day also needs to make sure there is a safety net for parents. If they withdraw their children from the streets, that their children are not hawking any longer, how will they put food on the table? The government needs to have the safety net for parents who withdraw their children from the streets.
All right, this enrollment initiative is actually a bold one, because looking at 18.3 million out of school children, which they're actually working to also, you know, enroll in school. But stakeholders are actually skeptical about this, saying that if we focus on enrollment, and then what about quality education? Because it's one thing to enroll students, children in school. It's another thing to also focus on quality education. You advocated them, you know, receiving formal education, but how qualitative, or what kind of quality education are they going to receive? Do you not think that we should begin to also talk about that? Because I know that even in the north, there is this quota system, you know, trying to ensure that they catch up with, you know, down south and other regions in the country. How can they ensure quality education as against just enrolling them in large numbers?
And added to that question is the matter of having the number of hands to manage this huge number of children. Quality teachers, do we have them?
That's right.
Okay, that is a very, very good question. As you know, if you want to roll out quality education, it needs lots of funding. We still have the issue of UBEC and counterpart funding with the state governments. The government needs to find a way to encourage state governments to put their own counterpart funding on the table so that UBEC will have the relevant funds to be able to provide the necessary educational infrastructure to enable the facilities to be available for these children to go into and get the necessary formal education. Without a doubt, I'll be the first to say that the infrastructure are not in place. The teachers are not in place to be able to mop up all these out-of-school children. But we need to take it slowly but surely. We need to make sure the funding is on the table. I know the legislators are trying to do something to make sure governments can be encouraged, state government can be encouraged to put their funding on the table. I have always advocated that before the federal government give the state government their monthly allocation, they should take out their counterpart funding for UBEC before giving them the funds. Thereby, that funds can be instantly available to pass on to UBEC and for UBEC to start rolling out the necessary infrastructure that is required to mop up these out-of-school children. So that needs to be addressed on one hand. As you know, peradventure, there are about 10 million Almajiri children in the north. We cannot on one day mop up all that 10 million. It needs to be a slow process, slowly but surely. But what will be important is for the Commission of Almajiri and Out-of-School Children to work collaboratively with UBEC to make sure we can provide this infrastructure. Without it, that the infrastructure will take a while to build. It's not, you can't build a school overnight. You can't provide quality teachers overnight. It needs huge investment and time. But with the political will and with the good intention, we will get there slowly but surely.
Now, what would you want this commission to do differently that other successive governments might have left behind in their effort to ensuring that these children return to schools? There might have been gaps that you noticed that you want them to address quickly, addressing the matters from the root and also ensuring that we have a stable structure that is sustainable and every other state can adopt at the end of the day.
I mean, I think the first important thing is that this commission to have the relevant support it requires from the federal government. Because we know whereby commissions are set up and they don't have the necessary funding from the government and they cannot do much. So the government must also support this commission to make sure they succeed. Now, there are various ways of tackling this issue. One of the things I have always said is that in the UK, one of the ways in which they deal with this issue is that when a child is born, parents are required to register the birth of that child within 42 days. If you do not do that, then there's a penalty for it, right? Nigeria needs to introduce such system that when a child is born, the parent has a responsibility for registering that child. So you can capture that child from birth. So we have the data that a child exists in XYZ local government. Now, if the government is aware or this commission is aware that a child exists, they need to start tracking that child to make sure when the child gets to school age, that child should come up on their radar as attending XYZ school. And if that child is not registered in school, this commission should have the relevant resource to police such parents and to make sure they zoom in on that parent to actually find out why that child is not in school and support such parents to make sure that child can be enrolled in school. So enrollment needs to be tracked, and that can only be tracked by making sure when that child is born, that child is already on the radar of this commission.
But some of these people use traditional birth attendants. Just to quickly butt into your line of thought, some of these people use traditional birth attendants. They don't believe in going to the regular hospitals that every other person might use. How do we track that?
Yeah, I mean, however you choose to give birth to your child is your prerogative. The issue we are talking about here is that the parent has a responsibility for registering that child. And if you don't, there is a penalty. It might even be an imprisonable penalty if you don't register your child when you give birth to that child. Because it's not just about education. is to enable the government also plan its population statistics and to make sure the government has got all the right resources, infrastructure in place to deal with their growing population. So if your parent doesn't do that, they don't take responsibility for doing that, then there should be a penalty. So when parents are aware that there's a penalty for not registering their child, hopefully they will do the needful.
Interesting stuff. Well, right. Okay. Land on your thoughts.
Yeah, so basically, once the commission is empowered to do this, and we are tracking every child. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a parent has the right to send their children to Almajiri to get Islamic education. Yeah. But at that point in time, the commission needs to intervene to say, yes, your child needs to go to a Sangaya to get Islamic education, but we also require to integrate that with formal education. So can you demonstrate to us how you are ensuring your child is getting formal education alongside a religious education? So the commission needs to engage parents on that level. And if there's no evidence that that child is accessing formal education, again, legislation should be used to tackle that.
Actually, that should not be a rocket science, because there are even so many schools in the southwest here and some other regions where you have them, side by side teaching both Islamic education and formal Western education. That's why we have something like CRK, RK, and some other things that have been embedded in the curriculum. But that's the region. The northern region is actually fraught with insecurity. We had so many students who had been in school. We know the Chibok schoolgirls, the Kankara boys were also, kidnapped, some taken for ransom and all of that. How do you think this would work at the end of the day if we have students now being enrolled in school and the insecurity is serving as a problem for them? Do you think the goal will be achieved at the end of the day?
That is why this initiative of mopping up out-of-school children is a brilliant initiative. Because what it is that it's the high number of out-of-school children we have that is fueling this insecurity. Because these out-of-school children, when they grow up, they have no skills to sell. They are not economically active. So naturally, they're a natural feeder for bandits and insecurity issues for it to be attractive to them. So with a little carrot dangling little money in front of them, they sort of can go along with what the kidnappers are suggesting that they do. Therefore, if we reduce the number of out-of-school children, we make sure children have got skill sets that will make them economically active in future. By default, that will reduce the number of out-of-school children. That would also reduce the number of...
But don't you think that's futuristic? Because the current one, those that have been radicalized and those who don't want to have anything to do with education, that had even grown, immersed themselves in what the atrocities they commit, and some of them coming from outside of the country, don't you feel they might serve as a hurdle, impediment for these children who want to be enrolled?
I mean,
so how do we handle them?
One of the things I've noticed, personally, one of the things I've noticed that this kidnapping of school children has gone down recently. Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, but that is my observation. Because even listening to the news, you hardly hear about school children being kidnapped. So I think the government of the day is doing something in terms of intensifying security around schools and school infrastructure. So I would encourage the government of the day to continue doing what they are doing to make sure kidnapping of school children is a thing of the past. Now, also, we need to also make sure there is no feeding those bandits to make sure they don't have any more children to recruit. Therefore, we need to mop up the streets and make sure these children are actually in schools receiving formal education. Also, we've also advocated to the government to make sure the security infrastructure around school is strengthened to make sure even when these bandits come and they want to kidnap these children, they don't find it easy to kidnap these children. We've made lots of suggestions in how security around schools infrastructure can be achieved. And I'm sure the government is following those initiatives. So that is going on one hand. On the other hand, we are mopping up the streets to make sure these children are not on the street and therefore they are in school and getting the relevant education. And before you know it, in the nearest future, we will have zero tolerance for out-of-school children and kidnapping will be a thing of the past.
All right. That's a fine place to leave the conversation right now, and we can only wish the Commission the best as it looks forward to achieving this very huge and tasking goal. From the United Kingdom, CEO, founder, IA Foundation, Ronke Adeagbo, thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.